Hello, welcome back to the architecture channel. Today we're going to pick up where we left off by discussing the different types of architecture. In particular, today we're going to discuss the difference between strategic architecture, program architecture, and project architecture, which we feel is the most important way to think about architecture. Um, Oftentimes this is not actually obvious because folks tend to focus on data architecture, technology architecture, process architecture. And we're not saying that that's not important, but essentially the way you approach architecture differs very significantly depending on whether you're looking at the strategic, the program, or the project level. Or to use the language of TOGAF, they use segment when it was at the program level, and they tend to talk about capability or solution when they're talking about the project level. So let's go ahead and talk about the different types of architecture. That is one dimension that we feel is a very good beginning dimension to get into architecture and how it works. So that dimension is represented in this slice of reality here, which we start with grand strategy, which is industry essentially, and then you have enterprise strategy, which is what we call strategic, and then you've got the program, which is more focused on operational considerations at the large capability level within the organization, such as generation, distribution, transmission, and then you've got the project, which is more tactical and focused on a particular problem. So let's go ahead and look at how the folks at TOGAF lay this out. In the TOGAF architecture, they have this picture, which talks about the different types of architecture. You've got the enterprise and strategic, you've got the segment, and then you've got the solution architecture. As you can see, the value chain goes down this direction, time is here, and the level of detail is here. So essentially what this is saying is an enterprise strategic architecture covers a broad length of time, it covers the complete value chain, but it's not very deep in terms of levels. Then you have the segment architecture, which is not as long in terms of time as the strategic architecture. It is, but however, it is deeper, and it also covers a piece of the value chain. And then you have the solutions at the bottom, which are more at the project tactical level, which are a breakdown of the segments, and they are also aligned to the value chain, but are at a more granular level. So that's essentially how the folks at TOGAF line it up. What we suggest is that one should organize architecture services similarly around strategic, segment/program architecture, and solution/project architecture. The reason is that these architecture efforts are really very different, and we'll get into that in quite a lot of detail later on about how to model programs and how to model projects versus strategy. But they really are different animals. And then you need to organize the operational or segment program piece around your major capabilities in the organization. Because we're particularly familiar with the energy industry, that's why we say power, transmission, distribution, and retail and customer is a good example of value chains associated with the energy industry. So as you know, there's this idea of domains within architecture. You can look at each of the types of architecture, i.e. strategic, program, and project, and you can also slice it by the types of architecture, which is technology, application, data, and business. Well, they're the standard TOGAF ones. There are additional domains one can think about, and subdomains, for example, cloud architecture within the technology section. So it's pretty complicated, but we feel that an essential starting point is to differentiate between strategic, program, and project architecture. So let's give a quick example so people understand what we're working with here. What we have here is the industry model, and the industry model is essentially how you look at the industry as a whole, and where you fit in the value chain. In the utility industry, there's a very good role-based model from the ENTSOE out in Europe, and it's really useful to have this understanding of okay, where are you in the value chain of the industry, and what is changing in the industry. So that's kind of the industry model, which is the grand strategy view. At the strategic model, then one can start thinking about the conceptual model for your enterprise. It's always good to start with a conceptual model that's based on industry standard. And as you can see here, here's the NIST model for the energy industry expanded by the Europeans, which I particularly like because it breaks out transmission and distribution, and it's a little bit clearer in my mind about some of the major areas. But nonetheless, NIST and the Europeans are very close, and it's good to think about these things with these clear ideas. So that's kind of thinking through your enterprise energy model, which links to your strategic architecture. And then this is a good way to think about how to lay out your architecture at the next level down, which is basically based on the smart grid plane in the energy industry, which is now we're starting to get into the operational layer. We need to kind of understand where we are, who's who in the zoo, and where we are in the overall architecture space for your industry. And then finally, we've got the, second to final, we can then map onto we can now look at the operational space, which is really digging into architectures of the market, enterprise, operation, generation, transmission, distribution, DER, and customer in the context of the energy industry. So that kind of gets us to, we've kind of looked at the industry, which is the ENTSOE view. We've kind of looked at the enterprise view, which is the NIST standardized model, and maybe with the extension for the Europeans. Now we're looking at the operational view, which is kind of the smart grid plane, looking at the different dimensions of the smart grid, and we can talk about this picture a little bit more in more detail in a later session. And then the final view is what might an actual solution look like, and this is, for example, a solution architecture, at least the beginnings in terms of the scope for a virtual power plant. So as you can see here, you're focusing in this solution. You're trying to get a handle on where are you with respect to what operations components are being hit, what standards you're working off, what data models, what business models, what protocols you're using, and what components are you using. So there are different aspects of your solution architecture are going to be, you're going to have to understand your business, the business models, what type of services we're dealing with, what our data models are, what the protocols we're using, and what components we're using. And that fits well into kind of trying to define, for example, if you want to do virtual power plants within a large energy industry player, how would all that fit within your enterprise, and how would that solution architecture look? So that's it for today. We're going to pick this up again soon. Hope you enjoyed this, and we will talk to you again soon. Again, for any questions, feel free to reach out to me, Eamon McCormick, at eamon.mccormick@outlook.com or emccormick@utilicast.com, whichever you prefer. And look forward to chatting soon. Thanks, bye.